By the building, two words spoken into a cracked smartphone, and the most exclusive restaurant in Manhattan went silent. The man who said them was wearing a frayed coat from the 80s, sitting at the worst table in the house next to the kitchen doors where the grease and chaos hit him every 30 seconds. The billionaire across the room, the one who'd been mocking him for the last hour, turned white as snow. Security froze mid-step. The floor manager looked like he'd just swallowed glass. But to understand how a phone call destroyed careers, evaporated millions, and exposed the ugliest truth about wealth in America, we need to go back 90 minutes. Back to when an old man walked through heavy oak doors into a world that didn't want him breathing their air. The Obsidian Room wasn't just a restaurant. It was a fortress where Manhattan's elite came to prove they'd made it. The walls were draped in black velvet imported from Italy. Austrian crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls. A single bottle of water cost more than most people spent on groceries for a week. This was Fifth Avenue, the kind of place where LVMH executives closed billion-dollar real estate deals over 1992 Screaming Eagle Cabernet. The air itself felt expensive, thick with designer perfume and the confidence of people who'd never heard the word no. Kane adjusted her apron for the 100th time that shift, her hands trembling just enough to notice. She was on month 3 of this nightmare, and every night felt like walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers. She wasn't like the other servers, the aspiring models with perfect teeth and dead eyes who treated customers like ATMs. Kane was a student drowning in debt, working doubles just to keep her tiny Queens apartment from going dark. Her bank account had $40 in it. Her next tuition payment was due in 6 days. She had no idea how she'd make it. Julian, the floor manager, materialized at her elbow like a bad smell. He wore suits 2 sizes too tight and cologne that screamed desperation mixed with pine. Kane, table 4 needs water. Now stop daydreaming or you're out. Julian ruled the floor with an iron fist, terrified of one thing above all else: upsetting the clientele who kept his job secure. If you want the full truth about what happened next, hit like so this story reaches more people. The dinner rush was in full chaos. At the center table sat Bradford Sterling, a hedge fund manager who was currently the restaurant's golden goose. He was loud, obnoxious, and drinking that $3,000 Cabernet like it was gas station soda. His trophy girlfriend laughed at every word he said, even when nothing was funny. Sterling had money in the restaurant group, which meant Julian treated him like royalty. Then the front doors creaked open. Marcus, the host who usually rushed to greet guests with fake enthusiasm, stayed frozen behind his podium. His nose wrinkled in visible disgust. Walking in from the October rain was an old man who looked like he'd wandered off a park bench and gotten lost. He wore a heavy wool coat that had seen better decades, probably during the Reagan administration. It was soaked through from the New York drizzle. His white hair was messy, uncombed. He clutched a worn leather satchel to his chest like it contained his entire life. He didn't belong in the Obsidian Room. He looked like he belonged under a highway overpass with a cardboard sign. The restaurant went quiet. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Champagne glasses paused mid-toast. In a place where image was literally everything, this man was a stain on a perfect canvas. Marcus finally stepped forward, blocking the old man's path with his body. "I'm sorry, sir. We are fully committed tonight. No tables available." His tone said what his words didn't get out. The old man looked up. His eyes were a piercing, watery blue behind wire-rimmed glasses that had probably been repaired with tape at some point. He spoke in broken, heavily accented English that made him sound even more out of place. "Please just soup, it is cold outside." Marcus sighed and glanced at Julian for backup. The floor manager marched over, his face tight with irritation. He was about to forcibly remove the man when Bradford Sterling's voice boomed across the restaurant. "Let him stay." Sterling was smirking, clearly entertained by the spectacle unfolding. "Put him in the corner by the kitchen doors. I want to see how the other half lives while I eat my $200 steak. It adds perspective, you know." The room erupted in polite, vicious laughter. Women in diamond necklaces covered their mouths. Men in $5,000 suits chuckled into their wine glasses. Julian saw an opportunity to please his biggest spender. He forced a smile that looked painful. "Right this way, sir." They led the old man past the velvet booths, past the roaring fireplace, past tables full of people who wouldn't make eye contact with him. They stuck him at a wobbly two-top right next to the swinging kitchen doors. Every time a server burst through with a tray, a blast of hot, greasy air smacked him in the face. The clatter of dishes and shouting chefs created a wall of noise. He sat down slowly, clutching his bag, looking small and utterly defeated. Julian grabbed Kane's arm hard enough to leave marks. You take him, do not offer the wine list, do not offer the specials. Get him a bowl of the cheapest soup we have, tap water, and get him out fast. He's ruining the aesthetic. Kane felt anger coil in her chest like a snake. She hated the way they looked at him, like he was garbage that had blown in from the street. She glanced at the old man trying to wipe rain off his glasses with a rough handkerchief. She grabbed a menu, ignoring Julian's orders, and walked over. As she passed Sterling's table, the hedge fund manager leaned back in his chair and snapped his fingers at her like she was a dog. Hey, sweetheart, make sure you sanitize that table after the hobo leaves, all right. Don't want to catch poverty, his girlfriend giggled. Bradford, stop, he's probably just lost. He's not lost, he's hungry, Sterling laughed loud enough for everyone to hear. Maybe I should toss him a bread roll like a pigeon. Kane bit her tongue so hard she tasted copper. She kept walking, her face burning. Comment justice if you believe he deserved what was coming. When she reached the small table by the kitchen, the noise of the dining room seemed to fade. Up close, the man didn't smell like the street. He smelled of old paper, rain, and faint tobacco, not unpleasant, just old. He looked up at her with eyes that held something she recognized, profound sadness mixed with resignation. Good evening, sir, Kane said softly, dropping the pretentious servant accent Julian forced them to use. My name is Kane. I'll be taking care of you tonight. The man looked at the menu she placed in front of him. His hands shook slightly as he opened it. He stared at the English descriptions, squinting: pan-seared scallops with saffron reduction, Wagyu beef with truffle demi-glace. It was too much, too complicated. He closed the menu and looked at her embarrassed. I do not understand much, he stammered. Just warm, something warm, please. From across the room, Bradford Sterling dropped a fork. On purpose, the metallic clang echoed. Check on the bum, will you? He shouted to Julian. Make sure he can pay. Julian marched over to Kane's station. He didn't even look at the old man. Kane, get his credit card up front. We aren't a charity. The old man shrank into his coat. He understood the tone, even if he didn't catch every word. He reached into his pocket with a trembling hand, searching for his wallet. No, Kane said firmly, turning her back to Julian. I will take his order first. Julian's eyes bulged. Excuse me. I said I will take his order, Kane repeated. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like it wanted to escape. She knew this could cost her everything. But looking at this man, she saw her own grandfather, who died 3 years ago in a facility that smelled like bleach and broken promises. She couldn't let them strip this man of his dignity. Julian leaned in close, his breath hot on her ear. You are walking a thin line, Vance. Get the money or you're out on the street with him. He stomped away, his shoes clicking like gunshots on the marble floor. The old man looked at Kane, his eyes watering. I go, he whispered. I go now. Please stay, Kane said instinctively, reaching out to touch his hand. It was ice cold, like he'd been outside for hours, and then she saw it. Tucked into the open flap of his leather satchel was a book. The title was Les Miserables, an ancient leather-bound French edition that looked like it belonged in a museum. Kane's mind flashed back 15 years. Her mother had been a translator before cancer took her. Their house had been filled with languages, books in Spanish, French, Mandarin, Russian. French had been their secret code, a language of comfort when the world felt too big and scary. Kane looked at the old man, then at the chaotic, hostile, English-speaking room that was treating him like a disease. She took a deep breath and made a decision that would change everything. She leaned in close, blocking out the view of Sterling and the staring diners. She lowered her voice and switched languages. Monsieur ne partez pas, vous êtes en sécurité ici avec moi. Sir, do not leave. You are safe here with me. The reaction was instant. The old man's head snapped up. The confusion vanished from his eyes, replaced by shock so pure it was almost heartbreaking. He stared at her like she'd just performed a miracle. Vous parlez français? You speak French? His voice was suddenly stronger, deeper. Oui, j'ai appris de ma mère, Kane said with a real smile. Yes, I learned from my mother. The menu is complicated, but I can help. What would make you happy? The man's shoulders dropped 3 inches. The tension left his jaw. He wasn't a confused vagrant anymore. He was a human being connecting with another human being. Ah, he sighed, a long, rattling exhale. I am tired, mademoiselle. I just want onion soup and perhaps a glass of wine, but not the colored water they usually serve tourists. Kane chuckled. She glanced at the wine list. She knew Julian would murder her if she opened a rare bottle for a man who looked like he couldn't afford a subway fare, but she'd already decided this might be her last night anyway. Un Bordeaux, she asked. J-Ad or Bordeaux, he said, his eyes twinkling for the first time. Un Grand Poilac, Kane nodded. She turned and walked to the bar. Rick, the bartender who was usually the only cool person in the building, looked at her skeptically. Julian said tap water, Rick warned. Give me the 2015 Chateau Margaux, Kane said calmly. Rick dropped the rag he was holding. Are you insane? That's $800 a glass. Sterling is drinking the Screaming Eagle, but even he didn't order the Margaux. I'll pay for it, Kane lied. She had $40 in her checking account and $200 in unpaid parking tickets. Just pour it. Crystal balloon glass, not the house glass. Rick shook his head slowly. It's your funeral, Kane. She carried the glass of dark ruby liquid back to the table, along with a basket of warm, crusty bread she'd snatched from the warmer. When she placed the wine in front of the old man, he didn't grab it greedily like Sterling grabbed everything. He lifted the glass by the stem, swirled it with the expertise of someone who knew wine, and inhaled deeply, his eyes closed. Magnifique, he whispered. He took a sip and looked at Kane with profound intensity. Merci, mademoiselle, je m'appelle Antoine. Je m'appelle Kane, she replied. Antoine tested the name on his tongue. Why is a girl who speaks the language of poets working in a place of sharks? He gestured vaguely at Sterling's table, where the hedge fund manager was now loudly berating a busboy for spilling a microscopic drop of water. Debts, Kane said simply. Debts. Life is expensive. Antoine nodded slowly, breaking a piece of bread. Yes, life is expensive, but dignity is priceless, and you have given me mine tonight. For the next 20 minutes, they existed in their own bubble. Antoine ate his soup with manners far better than anyone in the room. He told her about visiting New York for business but finding the city cold and the people colder. He told her about his wife who'd passed away years ago and how she used to make soup just like this in their kitchen in Paris. It was the most human interaction Kane had experienced in months, but the bubble was about to explode. Type yes if you want to see what happened when everything fell apart. Bradford Sterling had noticed the wine glass, he noticed the crystal, he noticed the label on the bottle Kane had left on the side station. Sterling stood up, his face flushed with alcohol and rage. He marched across the room, his heavy footsteps silencing conversations at every table he passed. He slammed his hand down on Antoine's wobbly table, causing soup to splash onto the white tablecloth. Is that, Sterling pointed a shaking finger at the glass, is that the 15 Margaux? Kane stepped between Sterling and Antoine. Can I help you, Mr. Sterling? You gave the good stuff to the hobo, Sterling shouted, spit flying from his mouth. I asked for the best wine in the house, and Julian told me you were out of the Margaux. And now I see the bum drinking it like it's boxed wine from 7-Eleven. Julian materialized instantly, his face the color of old newspaper. Mr. Sterling, there must be a mistake. The mistake is letting this trash in here, Sterling grabbed Antoine's coat sleeve. Look at him, he probably stole that jacket from a donation bin. He's spending my money, Julian. I invest in this restaurant group. Technically, I'm paying for that wine. Antoine remained seated. He didn't speak. He just watched Sterling with a calm, almost bored expression. He carefully wiped a drop of soup from his lip with the napkin. Get him out, Sterling commanded. Now, or I pull my funding and I make sure every friend I have on Wall Street blacklists this dump. Julian turned to Kane. His eyes were dead, defeated. Kane, take the wine away. Security will escort him out. No, Kane said. The word rang out clearly in the silent room. Excuse me, Julian stepped closer. He hasn't finished his meal. He is a paying customer. I won't let you throw him out into the rain just because he, Kane gestured to Sterling, is having a tantrum. The room gasped. A waitress standing up to a billionaire was career suicide. It was social suicide. It was just plain suicide. You're fired, Julian barked, spittle flying. Get your things and get out, security. Two large men in black suits appeared from the shadows near the entrance like they'd been waiting for this exact moment. They moved toward the table with purpose. Kane felt tears prick her eyes, but she didn't move. She stood in front of Antoine like a human shield. And then the old man stood up. He didn't stand up like a tired old man anymore. He stood up slowly, deliberately, unfolding to his full height. He smoothed down his frayed coat with careful hands. He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, and then he reached into that battered leather satchel. He didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a phone, an old, cracked smartphone that looked like it had survived a war. He dialed a number, put it to his ear, and spoke in perfect, crisp English with an accent that no longer sounded like a peasant. It sounded like pure aristocracy. Jean-Luc, yes, it's Antoine. I am at the Obsidian Room on Fifth Avenue. Yes, the one in the Sterling building. Bradford Sterling froze. The color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. Antoine looked directly at Sterling, his blue eyes turning to ice. Buy it, Antoine said into the phone. There was a pause. Everyone in the restaurant held their breath. No, Jean-Luc, not the restaurant, Antoine said, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent room. Buy the building and terminate the lease of the tenant on the ground floor immediately. Another pause. Sterling's mouth hung open. Yes, tonight. The silence in the obsidian room was heavier than the crystal chandeliers. Bradford Sterling stared at the old man, trying to process words that didn't make sense. By the building, it was absurd. This man was wearing a coat with frayed cuffs and buttons that didn't match. You're bluffing, Sterling spat, though his voice had lost its thunder. Who the hell do you think you are? This is a pathetic joke. Julian, throw them both out now. Share this video so more people understand what was about to hit. Julian, sweating through his expensive shirt, motioned to the security guards. Grab him, the police can sort out this disturbance. The two large guards stepped forward. One reached for Antoine's shoulder. Do not touch him, Kane said, stepping in front again. Her voice was shaking, but her resolve was iron. She didn't know if the old man was crazy or telling the truth, but she knew he didn't deserve to be manhandled. Antoine gently placed a hand on Kane's shoulder and moved her aside with surprising strength. He looked at the guard with an expression of calm authority that made the large man hesitate mid-reach. Then Julian's cell phone began to ring loudly in the silent room. It was his personal line, not the restaurant's. He looked at the screen, frowned in confusion, and sent it to voicemail. It rang again immediately. The shrill sound cut through the tension like a knife. Answer it, Julian, Antoine said softly. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a command. Julian, unnerved by the certainty in the old man's voice, answered the phone. This is Julian. Look, I'm in the middle of a situation. Julian stopped talking. His eyes went wide, staring at the far wall as the color drained entirely from his face, leaving him a sickly shade of gray that matched the marble floors. He began to tremble visibly. Yes, Mr. Henderson, I understand. Yes, sir. Right away, sir. Julian lowered the phone slowly like it weighed 50 pounds. He looked at Bradford Sterling, then at the security guards, and finally, with an expression of absolute terror, at the old man in the shabby coat. Julian, who was that? Sterling demanded, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Was it the owners? Did you tell them about this bum making threats? Julian ignored Sterling completely. He took a shaky step toward Antoine and did something no one in that room had ever seen him do. He bowed, a deep, genuine bow of subservience. Mr. Dubois, Julian stammered, his voice cracking. I had no idea. There has been a terrible misunderstanding. A gasp rippled through the dining room like a shockwave. The name Dubois was whispered from table to table, spreading like wildfire. Forks clattered onto plates. Wine glasses were set down too hard. Antoine Dubois. The name was legendary, not just in Paris but on Wall Street, in real estate circles, in the halls of power where decisions that shaped cities were made. He was the silent titan behind LVMH's competitors, a real estate mogul who owned half of Paris and significant chunks of Manhattan. A man known for his ruthless business acumen and his near-total reclusiveness since the death of his wife years ago. He was worth 10 times what Bradford Sterling hoped to be worth in his lifetime, maybe 20 times. And he'd been sitting by the kitchen doors eating soup. Antoine didn't even look at Julian. He finished the last sip of his Chateau Margaux, placed the glass gently on the table, and turned to the security guards who were still hovering uncertainly. Gentlemen, Antoine said, his voice crisp and commanding, you are employed by the building management, correct? Not the restaurant itself. Yes, sir, the lead guard said, instinctively recognizing the alpha in the room. His posture straightened. Excellent, Antoine said. As of 3 minutes ago, my holding company acquired the controlling stake in this property from Mr. Henderson. I am your new employer. The shift in power was visceral. It sucked the oxygen out of the room. Anton pointed a long, slender finger at Bradford Sterling, who looked like he was about to have a stroke. Remove that man from my premises. He is trespassing and creating a public disturbance. If this shocked you, comment karma below. The change happened so fast it didn't feel real. Bradford Sterling's face turned a violent shade of purple that clashed with his expensive suit. You can't do that. Do you know who I am? I have money in this place. You can't just buy a skyscraper in 3 minutes over the phone. That's not how it works. Anton adjusted his glasses calmly, like he was explaining basic math to a child. Mr. Sterling, you deal in hedge funds, you gamble with other people's money and call it power. I deal in assets. When I want something, I buy it. Jean-Luc has had the paperwork ready for this building for 6 months. We were just waiting for the right price. Tonight, the price became irrelevant. Sterling looked around the room desperately for support, but the other diners, CEOs, socialites, politicians, people who'd been laughing at Anton an hour ago were all staring at their plates. They wouldn't make eye contact with Sterling. They knew a bigger shark when they saw one, and they were already mentally distancing themselves from a sinking ship. Julian, do something, Sterling screamed, desperation creeping into his voice. Tell him I'm your best customer. Tell him I keep this place running. Julian was shaking so hard his teeth chattered. He looked at Anton, pleading silently with his eyes. Mr. Dubois, sir. Mr. Sterling is a valued investor in the restaurant group. He was, Anton corrected, his voice cutting through Julian's stammering like a blade. He was a valued investor. Anton pulled out his cracked phone again and dialed a number. He put it on speaker. The sound echoed through the silent restaurant. We, Anton, Jean-Luc's voice filled the room. Professional, efficient. Jean-Luc, the lease for the ground floor restaurant space. What are the termination clauses? Standard immediate termination clause in the event of a change in building ownership. Anton, we can evict within 24 hours if we choose. Execute it, Anton said simply. Tonight. Consider it done. Anton hung up and looked at Julian. The floor manager looked like he was watching his entire life collapse in real time. You are closed permanently. I suggest you begin inventory immediately. Julian grabbed the edge of a table to steady himself. His career in high-end dining was over, just like that, decades of climbing the ladder gone in seconds. Sterling, realizing his financial stake in the restaurant had just evaporated, lunged toward Anton. You old bastard, you just cost me $2 million. I'll sue you into the ground. The two security guards moved with lightning speed. Before Sterling got within 5 feet of Anton, they had him restrained, his arms twisted behind his back in a way that looked painful. Get your hands off me, Sterling bellowed, thrashing like a caught fish. His trophy girlfriend was already grabbing her Prada purse and edging toward the door, abandoning the sinking ship without a word. Take him out the back exit, by the dumpsters, Anton instructed the guards calmly. He seems fond of talking about trash. He should get acquainted with it properly. Sterling continued to scream threats and obscenities as he was dragged through the kitchen doors, the very doors he'd banished Anton to earlier. The kitchen staff stared wide-eyed as the mighty hedge fund manager was hauled out like a bag of garbage. The dining room was dead silent. No one moved, no one ate, no one even breathed loudly. They were all terrified of drawing the attention of the man in the frayed coat. Rumors would swirl for weeks about what happened to Sterling that night. Some said he lost everything, his investments, his reputation, even his penthouse 3 blocks away. Word on the street was that Dubois bought that too, just to make a point. Others whispered about offshore accounts being frozen and federal investigations into Sterling's hedge fund practices that had been quietly brewing for years. But those are just rumors. What isn't a rumor is what happened next. Anton stood alone in the center of the room for a moment, the undisputed king of the castle. Then he turned slowly and looked at the only person in that entire restaurant who hadn't treated him like garbage. Kane was standing by the kitchen doors, tears streaming down her face, her apron still on, technically fired. Anton walked toward her slowly. Every eye in the restaurant followed him. He stopped in front of her and spoke in French, his voice gentle. Mademoiselle Kane, you gave me dignity when no one else would. You risked your livelihood for a stranger. That is rare. That is precious. Kane wiped her eyes, embarrassed. I couldn't let them. I know, Anton said. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a business card, not a fancy one, just plain white with a phone number. Call this number tomorrow. Jean-Luc will be expecting you. I am opening a new restaurant in this building, a real one, where the food matters more than the chandeliers. I would like you to manage it. Kane stared at the card like it might disappear. I don't know anything about managing. You know the only thing that matters, Anton said. You know how to treat people like they're human. He glanced around the room at the frozen, terrified diners. These people forgot that a long time ago. Anton buttoned his frayed coat and picked up his leather satchel. He walked toward the exit, past tables full of millionaires who didn't dare make eye contact. At the door, he paused and turned back one last time. This restaurant is closed, he announced to the room. Those of you with reservations for future dates will be contacted by my office. Good evening. And then he walked out into the October rain, leaving behind a room full of people who would tell this story for years but would never quite capture the truth of it. Kane looked at the business card in her hand. She looked at Julian, who was slumped against the bar, his face buried in his hands. She looked at the empty tables, the abandoned wine glasses, the half-eaten steaks cooling on plates. She untied her apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the nearest table. Then she walked out the front door, into the rain, into a future she couldn't have imagined when she'd woken up that morning with $40 in her bank account and no hope. The Obsidian Room closed permanently that night. The building was sold within a week. Bradford Sterling's name disappeared from Wall Street social pages, and rumors suggest he moved to Florida under a cloud of federal scrutiny, though that's never been confirmed. Julian reportedly took a job managing a chain restaurant in New Jersey. But Kane, 6 months later, she was running Le Refuge, the most talked-about restaurant in Manhattan where the prices were reasonable, the staff was treated like family, and a frayed coat wouldn't get you thrown out. Sometimes the most expensive thing you can give someone costs nothing at all. Respect. Dignity. A moment of human connection in a world that's forgotten what that means. And sometimes, just sometimes, that moment changes everything. Did this story shock you? Hit like if you believe dignity is priceless. Drop a comment with your thoughts on what Sterling deserved. And subscribe because stories like this, where the powerful get humbled and the kind get rewarded, don't get told enough. We need more of this truth in the world.